Here we go.
Welcome to the Tuesday Weekend, our podcast about the bar and restaurant industry. I am Josh Hobson, and with me today are my unindicted co-conspirators, Nick Parkin and Trae and
It's the Tuesday Weekend.
It's Tuesday Weekend. Welcome, everyone. Hey, guys, remember a couple years ago how we had that global pandemic and lots of people died and everything shut down? That pretty much sucked. But while there are always shifts and fluctuations in society, the shutdown really clearly demarcates a before time. And a lot of small restaurants didn't survive the shutdown. Some small owners were able to shift resources to a food truck or to a fully takeout model, but not everyone could. And those that made it out found increased prices on goods and services, and a workforce less willing to put up with both the high pressure and low pay. Then these lingering effects then doomed another large swath of independent restaurants. So years ago, before the pandemic, I had made this educated guess, that family restaurants would start facing extinction level events in the coming decades, due to a lot of different factors. And really, our society's reaction to the coronavirus did not disabuse me of that notion one bit. But way back then, I thought basically the restaurants that we would have left are the ones where the patrons can drop several $100s per meal, or a grab-and-go counter service model, or food trucks, or, of course, multinational fast food chains, which are trying to automate it as soon as they can and get rid of the workforce altogether. But before this turns into a completely doom and gloom monologue about your local bar's dark and foreboding future, or a full-blown eulogy to the restaurants we have loved and lost, I should let my co-hosts talk. So briefly, I want to just get a little bit about where you were, what you were doing during the pandemic. Let's go like 19, 20, 21, so just before it happened and during it all. So Trae, I will start with you. How was your pandemic?
Oh, geez. So I was working in coffee after doing retail front of house bakery for a wholesale baker that had a small pair of retail outlets. And it was a super toxic workplace. So I went on, worked for a local coffee company in New York City called Joe Coffee, where I was working in their roastery, doing production, packaging, delivery. At the time, I was the assistant manager there. So I was running the reports. I was the order taker for all of our wholesale clients. And right about 2019, we were working with a company called Trae Coffee, which is a direct ship mail order third-party ordering service. Really awesome company that partners with a bunch of different coffee companies to get their retail coffee shipped to you. So you don't need to go through that company's site. You can have a subscription. You can tell them what kind of coffees you like. Their algorithm processes those orders and then spits them out to all the different coffee companies and says, hey, send these people this coffee. What we were starting to notice, we had just started to use a compostable cornstarch packaging that, and I promise this is relevant to the pandemic. It was produced in Wuhan, China. All of a sudden, we had gone from these cardboard boxes to these red bags. And in about mid to late September of 2020, we suddenly couldn't get those bags anymore. The factories were being shuttered. They weren't able to produce. And we're like, gosh, what's going on over there? So we were all kind of laughing and joking. It's like, oh, hope it doesn't come over here. Went back to using the cardboard boxes that were perfectly shaped for the bags of coffee and didn't think too much of it around Christmas time until about January. And in January, we were starting to hear reports of this illness in Seattle and upstate New York, down in like Florida or something. That like the first 2 or 3 instances where everybody was like freaking out. Flash forward to mid-February, early March, my partner and I were headed out on a vacation, the first vacation I'd taken in a long time. And we had this flight down to Georgia, and my partner was like, I'm afraid to fly. We're going to get sick. We need to wear masks. And our friends, one of whom works with me at the coffee company, was like, nah, you're overblowing it. That was the first weekend in March. And about a week later, I was laid off because everything in New York just shut down. All of, we were working a lot, very close with the Danny Meyer group, which shut down all of their restaurants all at once, going, all right, when this blows over in 3 weeks, we'll all be back up. But we were a very primary wholesale oriented group. Even though we were producing for our own outlets, we also had a huge restaurant group ordering from us, and it just ground us to a standstill. They were asking for volunteers to stop, and I'm like, all right, well, I can take a week off. I took off that Monday, and on Tuesday I got a call from my general manager saying, you're not going to be coming back next week. So that was how it started. A couple of days later, my partner, who's an educator at a community college in the area, was told that everything was going remote. So we had that. We got to spend a lot of time together and with the dog, which was very nice. And I went stir crazy. So in about 6 weeks, when a direct ship single platform coffee company was reaching out looking for people because their business went through the roof, I jumped on the chance to work in the roasting end of things with them, learned how to roast coffee, was doing a lot of work with them in their packaging facility, which was, all small, 8 ounce to 2 pounds of coffee being sent in individual mailers, getting picked up by the post office every day, and they were going gangbusters. So I did that for a few months, and then I got the call from my former coffee company that they were opening back up. They were offering me my old position back, which was a salary, and I was like, guys, I'm going to get out of here. So it was a lot of COVID protocols, a lot of spraying things and lots of surfaces with bleach. I remember right before we had shut down, there were these jokes as we were delivering in Manhattan, and we worked in Long Island City in Queens, just over a bridge, as people would come back in and like, spray you, sanitize everything. And like, it was really funny for about a week, and then it became really serious. Coffee is not a product that you need to use gloves with for the most part. We were like in gloves, masks, taking temperatures, like anytime you would leave the building. And anytime somebody would come down with COVID, the whole system would shut down for the day while everybody else had to go get tested. So that was it. It was a lot of everything shutting down over and over again while trying to stay open, where, workplaces, offices all shut down and stayed shut down. We would go in and then have these days where we would be sitting outside of in New York, it's called City Med, a like small urgent care facility chain, waiting to get tested. And finally, when they came out with the rapid tests, at least we were able to get back to work that night. That was the pandemic. And then a couple of years later, after weathering the pandemic and getting that delightful unemployment check, which I would have rather worked, to be honest. It was nice to get that money, but sitting at home, somebody like me, somebody like a food service person, where part of the reason you're in this industry is because you want to be busy. But after a couple of years and working at those 2 coffee companies, my partner and I recognized that we had the chance to get out of New York, because when it shut down, we realized we didn't miss a lot. We missed some of the nice restaurants, but we weren't going out every night. We were going out twice a month. And so we went for the better quality life, and that's when we moved out to Boulder.
Cool.
That's my story.
Sweet. All right. Nick?
I'd been at the same job for about 4 years, set shifts, everything like that, working at a nice restaurant out on Coronado. Going into the pandemic, actually had a couple of friends who got COVID before COVID was announced.
Oh, fun.
Like when they went in and finally got tested, they're like, oh yeah, I had COVID back in February. And it's like, oh yeah, and we were helping you move into a new apartment and stuff. Like, no idea. Just thought she had a bad flu, whatever. I was actually racing sailboats in Puerto Vallarta, which was an absolute blast. I mean, we're down there mid-March, it's spring break. Start of the first race is right in front of downtown Puerto Vallarta, which all has beaches. So you're getting cheered on by like 10,000 people, which is pretty cool. 3 days later, I get a text saying, hey, we have to close the restaurant because of this COVID thing. And at the same time is when like all the sports stopped. Like the Utah Jazz, of course, with Rudy Gobert was the legendary one where it's like, I'm fine, I don't have anything. And then 2 days later, there's no more NBA.
Oh, sorry, everyone.
Oops.
At the same time, it goes from spring break to us watching them just bus people to the airport and fly them home. Probably 24 cruise ships stopped in while we were there for the next 3 or 4 days.
Oh, gosh,
when we left, there was about 14 cruise ships wrapped it up like you'd see the spring break thing all next to each other in the harbor because they didn't have enough dock space for them all. So they were all literally just anchored and then kind of buoyed together so they wouldn't bounce off each other. while I'm texting work, I'm like, okay, if we're going to close for even a couple of weeks, gave them all the procedures and protocols to follow with the kegs and everything like that, you know, pull the lines, do everything like this, disconnect everything because you're going to turn everything off. And being in California, Trey, like you in New York, we were the two states that took it dead serious.
Yes.
So
Thank goodness for that.
we had bars and stuff open and all after. Out here, it was about 2 months, but it was entirely outdoors, which is easy to do in San Diego. Masks on at all times if you're working. We were supposed to open in June because California said you can reopen. You have to serve outside, though. It's like, okay, no problem. We were supposed to reopen in June. They put out feelers to all of our, you know, coworkers and everything. And I'd say about 90% said, yeah, sure, we'll come back. Because like you said, I went from seeing a couple hundred people a day to sitting in my room, binge watching stuff or reading through just reams of books.
Yeah.
You know, talking to my neighbors across the street up on balconies, like, hey, how you doing? You know, what's going on with you guys? Walking around, seeing a downtown area just completely devoid of humanity is really surreal. The only thing we really saw moving around at all was the thousands of homeless who were bused to San Diego by Texas, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. That was really nice. Yeah, where everyone's like, you guys have a lot of homeless now. And it's like, yeah, we know. They were gifts from other states during COVID. We really appreciate them. After we go back, we go in and have a meeting, and half the meeting is Zoom. The other half is people live in the restaurant. We're all sitting 6 feet apart, you know, with masks on, listening to our vaunted head of HR tell us over and over again, but you can opt out at any time. We're not going to report you. You can still get your full unemployment payment. And California kicked that up nice. It was $1,000 a week because you need that to live here.
Yeah.
My unemployment without that would have been $400 a week. That's not even rent. And then most of the staff in the 24 hours they gave them all backed out and said, nope, we don't want to work. So my restaurant probably lost 12 grand in food because this was just like the meeting before we start setting up and going in a couple of days. I mean, it's a seafood place. Yeah. They had to throw it all away. We can't do it fresh. We can't we could have people, they cooked as much as they could for employees. And we all told friends, hey, you want a good fish, just go out there and they'll make you anything you want. You can have it. So went through that. Also didn't really check the lines and stuff when I was there. 1st of August when we actually opened. Skeleton staff. I mean, we're talking 10 servers, 2 bartenders, 5 cooks for a restaurant that usually seats 250. Masks on, masks, no mask. I never saw, like, we hired a new bartender. I saw her at a place after we could take when you're eating, you could take your mask off, of course. I'd never seen her face, and I'd worked with her for 3 months.
Right. I had
sitting across from her, like, Bria, and she's all Nick, and like we recognized the voices. We'd never seen each other, and we'd known each other for 3 months.
Exactly. I had a bit of that experience of like what my mind had filled in for what your face looks like does not match up to what your face actually looks like. But how would I know? Yeah, I've just never seen that part.
I mean, I will say one of the positives of wearing masks all the time is I had glasses when I worked, so I'd just wear a mask, guard, whatever, so my glasses wouldn't fog up. They couldn't see my mouth move when I was working. So instead of saying stuff in my head, I started getting in the habit of like, oh my God, this stupid mouth, shaking my head. So in California, we went a solid 5 months, still masks on and all that. December came around. They combined us with LA for bed space when COVID got really bad in that winter. And we were like, it was December 2nd. At the time, San Diego had like 90% bed. You could get one. LA had like 2%. Yeah, it was fine then. Then they just started shipping people down from LA, and we went from having 90% available to 2% available in 5 days. As soon as they said that, I started doing shutdown procedures for the bar part of the restaurant.
Wow.
Like telling them Mary bottles every night, do this, do this, do this, do this. We're not going to be open for at least 2 months. And then on the side note, when we did first open, we had to replace our entire beer system because they did not only not disconnect anything, they didn't even drain the lines, and they'd been sitting for 3 months with, I know I mentioned this on another cast. It was all supposed to be replaced, and they're like, oh no, we cleaned it. And I'm like, I am never drinking a beer here ever, and I'm not going to sell beer to people. So after that, came back, built the outdoor stuff that's still standing here in San Diego for the most part for all the restaurants because everybody has a patio now, and slowly started getting back to normal. But again, most cooks were in construction. Lots of the servers went out and got other jobs. The notion, which is just asinine, that, like I said, that big unemployment payment stopped in August. That's why everyone all of a sudden wanted to come back to work. And then when people are like, oh, well, no one wants to work, they're all sitting at home on unemployment. It's like, can't afford to live here on unemployment. Not unless you're in mom and dad's basement. There's just or have like 10 roommates. There's no way you can do it. Right. People just got other jobs. They moved out of the industry. Like they didn't want to put up with the people anymore. And I know it's coming up in the next segment, but the people were just egregiously bad when they were bad. Yeah. Be in front of the house, having to be a face. When I first started too, and we did that, I was inside a huge restaurant behind a bar making drinks entirely by myself. Oh. I spent the first 3 months just behind a bar with the radio on making drinks.
Yep.
No tables, nothing to do, no one to talk to, no bar. I mean, and just watching the orders coming in from people who'd been locked in their houses for 3 months and apparently forgetting how anything works.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Yeah.
How to
it was
interact
rough.
with other human people.
But like I said, we just didn't have the workers come back. And I mean, a lot of people, some people actually retired. They were older and stuff, but we lost a lot of good people to that. And when you talked about the restaurants leaving, I mean, mom and pops and everything, we had 5,200 restaurants going into COVID in San Diego, greater San Diego area.
Mhm.
After the first closure thing, we were at 4,000.
Wow.
So we lost over 1,200 spots around the city and stuff. And
Nope.
in my opinion, that does go to mismanagement. I mean, we've talked about this before where we pay a full minimum wage here. So when the manager says we have to cut labor, they have to cut labor. Unlike the rest of the country where we have to cut labor, we're going to cut 5 servers. It's like, great, you're saving $10 an hour because you're paying them $2 an hour. You're not, that's not going to do anything in the long run.
That's not going to keep you afloat.
You get paid to work out here and do that, but a lot of people just walked away. All went to different jobs, just got sick of it. I mean, when everyone kept said, oh, this is get a real job, or what's your other job? I love that one when I'm working. Oh, what's your other job? And I'm like, I do this full time and have for over 30 years. This is my full-time job. And I love doing it. And like Trae said, I love being busy. I love talking to people. I mean, that's why I do this.
Yeah.
But a lot of people didn't feel that way, especially after the way regular people really reacted.
Yeah. And we definitely will get back to the reaction part. So I had a slightly different entry into COVID in September of 2019. I had a bad bike crash and I broke a couple of vertebrae in my back and one in my neck. And for 8 weeks was in a full torso and neck brace. And my world was suddenly reduced to the bed, the bathroom, or the couch. I couldn't even cook for myself. I also broke a clavicle. There was a bunch was wrong with me, but my arm was in a sling and I couldn't. Oh, it was so frustrating. And I watched everything on Netflix that I wanted to. And like, I was good. I was caught up. And then about mid-January, the orthopedic surgeon still didn't want me throwing around 50-pound cases of potatoes. So he really didn't want me going back to kitchen work. So I got a serving job at the mom and pop joint, like the neighborhood joint right around the corner from me, and was actually starting to both get more strength back in my back and then kind of get more used to serving to that clientele, because I was living in Middle Tennessee at the time, and that restaurant's particular clientele tended towards the older end of the population and their peculiarities. But I was actually really starting to get kind of good at that job. And then I remember watching the helicopter crash with Kobe, and that was the big story. And also on the news was this other little weird story about, closed downs and like, and people getting sick. Well, anyway, Tennessee shut down dining rooms, which is fair. And I give full credit to the ownership, Franklin Chop House. Go eat there. They're good people. They're still there. They managed to survive the pandemic. And the owner, what was really great of him, if you want to go on unemployment, that's yours. If you want to find another job, I'm not here. I'm not going to stop you. If you want to hang out and see what happens, as soon as I could start my to-go orders or whatever, I will get as much of the crew back as quickly as I can. And he really, as an owner, his first thought really was for his staff. And so I absolutely appreciate owners like that. But I, being the impatient type, got a job at the fish counter at the grocery store instead, and then spent basically the next year and a half being a fishmonger. Yeah, cutting lots and lots of 6 and 8 ounce salmon portions. But, those couple of weeks between when the pandemic really started and we had all the mask protocols and all the wiping down every surface and all that slowed everything down. There was an extra 2 minutes to the steps of service for every table. And, that slowed everything down. Yeah. But then also at the fish counter, it's funny there because where I was largely skews right, but essentially that grocery store, the entire spectrum of political thought is my clientele, and everyone who steps up to you, whatever's on their mind, they automatically assume that you're just going to agree with them. So if they come and say, "Hey, sorry, you have to wear the mask," I'm like, "Yeah, all right." They're like, "Oh, the mask is bullshit." I'm like, well, okay, you have to wear it for like the 10 minutes you're walking around the store. I live in this for 9 hours, so calm down a little bit, maybe. Also, like, is this ruining your life right now? Because I would rather not die. That's a personal preference, minor thing. But then the restaurants opened back up, and I just, didn't want to go back immediately. Like, I'd had enough of the public interaction at the fish counter. And like Nick alluded to, when I have a mask on, I don't have much of a poker face in general in life. So when I have a mask on, that is definitely beneficial when I have a customer facing job. And essentially, it was just stressful enough that by the time my wife and my lease ended there, we decided to take the next 3 months and hike the top half of the Appalachian Trail instead of, figuring out how to deal with more customers in restaurants. But we're getting a little long in this segment right now, so I'm going to cut to our first break here. But before I get to that break, I really do want to invite our audience, leave us a comment. Tell us your story, your experience in the industry over that time, or if you don't work in restaurants, tell us about, some of your favorite local places that did not make it through. But
if you don't work in restaurants, tell us what it was like being on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Like, these are valuable insights for us. So, all right, great. We will be right back.